Her entire life from start to finish was built on deception. This story reveals how a relentless con artist chased after big money and how many lives her schemes would touch. Michelle grew up in Hearst, a suburban town near Dallas, Texas. She had a younger sister named Laura. Their mother left in search of a better life, leaving their father to raise the girls alone. Managing two daughters by himself was far from easy. He scraped by with sporadic construction jobs and often turned to alcohol. In his pursuit of quick cash, he repeatedly concocted and carried out cunning schemes. He bounced from one factory job to another, intentionally injuring himself to collect insurance payouts and compensation. For a while, the scam worked, but not for long. CCTV footage at one workplace exposed the scheme, leading to his arrest and imprisonment. From an early age, Michelle was surrounded by lies, deception, and manipulation. This was the only life she knew, and she longed to escape it by any means. But there was no outrunning herself. Dishonesty had already become ingrained in her, and she no longer knew any other way to live. By the age of 15, she was desperate to grow up quickly and leave behind the poverty she so deeply resented. Michelle was undeniably striking. A petite, athletic brunette who easily caught the attention of boys her age and even older men. Early on, she realized that her beauty and charm gave her influence, and she quickly learned how to use that power to manipulate the men around her to get whatever she wanted. This marked the start of a long chain of romantic entanglements with different partners. At 17, Michelle left school and entered her first marriage to 16-year-old Kenneth O'Brien. She told him she was pregnant and wanting to take responsibility for his young wife and their unborn child. Kenneth enlisted in the army. The couple moved often, and during their marriage, 2 more children were born. One city after another came and went. But the instability of military housing was far from the life Michelle wanted. She felt she deserved more. And after 5 years, she walked away from the marriage, accusing her husband of abuse and infidelity. Returning to her hometown of Hearst, she presented herself to relatives and friends as a victim of domestic violence, receiving sympathy, support, and the chance to rebuild her life. In time, she fell for Brandon, a former classmate. He was completely smitten with her and welcomed her 3 children without hesitation. The couple began planning their wedding. But the night before the ceremony, Brandon was shocked to discover that Michelle had never actually divorced her first husband. She claimed she had been too frightened to speak to Kenneth about the divorce because of his alleged abuse. And so she had never submitted any paperwork. With the help of a lawyer, the situation was resolved quickly and the couple married in 1994. At first, their home life was steady and uneventful. Brandon focused on growing his IT company while Michelle worked as a dental assistant, but a quiet, ordinary life was never enough for her. She always craved something bigger. Soon, she began bringing home various dental tools and supplies along with Cash that wouldn't even fit in her purse. Brandon sensed something was wrong. Eventually, Michelle was caught stealing, and they narrowly avoided going to trial. But for Brandon, this was only the beginning of his doubts. After neighbors reported that different cars were frequently showing up at their house while he was at work, he installed audio recorders throughout several rooms to find out what was really going on. When he listened to the recordings, Brandon heard multiple men coming into their home throughout the day. Conducting his own quiet investigation, he discovered that Michelle's first marriage had ended not because of abuse, as she had claimed, but because of her repeated infidelities. That was the final straw. Brandon demanded a divorce. Michelle was enraged that he was the one ending the marriage and decided to retaliate while he was at work. "I had a beautiful saltwater aquarium with thousands of dollars worth of fish," Brandon recalled. "She dumped chemicals into it and killed every one of them." But Michelle didn't stop there. Brandon also had a beloved dog named Domino. Michelle gave the dog large doses of sleeping pills which ultimately killed him. In her anger, she ended Domino's life. Brandon said, "If you're shocked already, this is just the beginning. It was a nightmare that never ended. You can't make that girl disappear." Sadly, he only uncovered the truth about Michelle after his marriage was already in ruins, and everything she put him through was mild compared to what she did to other men. It later came to light that John Paul Ray, a former classmate from Hearst High School, was actually the father of her first child. Instead of telling John the truth, she claimed to Kenneth O'Brien that the baby was his, pushing him into marriage. For 13 years, Kenneth believed the oldest boy was his biological son. John later told police that Kenneth paid child support from the time the child was 5 until adulthood, never knowing he wasn't the father. After divorcing Brandon, Michelle moved in with John, the real father of her first child. They lived together in a common-law marriage for 8 years. Their relationship ended abruptly when John began to suspect Michelle was being unfaithful. She didn't deny it. She openly admitted she was having an affair. John moved out and left most of his belongings behind. Michelle's next romance was with Greg Williams. By then, neither of them was young, and both carried the weight of failed marriages. Greg had been married twice and had a daughter. After he and his second wife, Katie, divorced in 2003, they agreed to share custody of their daughter, Taylor. There was no formal child support arrangement because they remained on good terms. Wealthy, accomplished, and generous, Greg seemed like an ideal partner for Michelle. In 2007, they welcomed a daughter together named Michaela. A year later, they tied the knot. Their marriage seemed like the embodiment of the American dream. Wealth, children, and love in abundance. Michelle appeared to have finally risen above hardship, reaching the life she had always longed for. Greg Williams cherished his family deeply. Raised in a household of strict principles, he had achieved success through his own efforts. From a young age, he was passionate About sports and held a black belt in martial arts. Beyond his love of physical activity, Greg was also an enthusiast of firearms. Both he and Michelle owned guns which they kept at their home in Keller. Michelle's firearm, a silver .40 caliber pistol, was stored in a safe, while Greg's black .45 caliber pistol was always loaded and kept in a case beneath his bedside table. The couple was committed to making their marriage work. They hosted birthday parties for their children from previous marriages at their Keller home. And Michelle's older children often enjoyed barbecues and pool parties there. The house was frequently bustling with friends and family. Yet, despite the picture-perfect suburban setting and their bright young daughter, Greg and Michelle were far from a conventional American couple. They had met through an online community focused on bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism. Their wild adult-themed house parties had sparked numerous complaints from neighbors, though nothing had ever been made public. Eventually, the couple decided to move. On the night before their planned move, Michelle and Greg stayed up late, busy preparing to purchase a new $4.5 million home. They had an emotional conversation about the move. Greg remained alone in the bedroom, while Michelle went to her crying daughter and fell asleep beside her. Then, in the early hours of October 13, 2011, at 4:40 a.m., an emergency call came in. A woman was heard screaming on the phone claiming that a robber had attacked her and her husband. She was injured and her husband had been shot. Within minutes, police arrived at the scene. Inside the home, detectives found a television blaring and a baby sleeping peacefully on the couch. Michelle's daughter was sound asleep, completely unaware of the supposed attack. The woman's behavior immediately raised suspicion. She acted oddly and did not appear to have experienced a traumatic burglary. Soon, the gated community was swarming with police cars, detectives, and forensic teams. The property was cordoned off as officers meticulously searched every corner of the nearly 5,000 square foot home. Michelle was fully dressed, her hair perfectly styled, and she appeared unnervingly calm. She told the police she had been asleep during the incident, but her appearance and composure suggested otherwise. As the sole witness, she was taken to the Keller Township Police Station for questioning. After hours of interviews with police and investigators, Michelle's account began to unravel. She claimed that an intruder dressed entirely in black had struck her on the head with a wrench. She said she fell from the blow but remained conscious and then heard a gunshot. According to her, the assailant fled through the back door of the house. Michelle Williams' story didn't align with the evidence at the scene. Greg Williams had been shot in the head while lying in bed. A .40 or .45 caliber handgun, presumed to be the intruder's, was found near the back door alongside a wrench. Neither weapon bore any fingerprints and there were no signs of forced entry. The family's valuables and cash remained untouched. CCTV footage from a neighbor's camera showed only one car entering the gated community in the hours leading up to the incident, which Police confirmed belonged to a newspaper delivery driver. Ruling out any outside intruder, Michelle had fabricated the attack. She struck herself with a wrench and staged their large home to make it appear as though a robbery had taken place. But detectives noticed several inconsistencies that didn't add up. Michelle Williams was fully dressed, her hair perfectly styled and her makeup freshly applied, appearing as if she were expecting someone. The gun allegedly used in the crime was found inside the house with no fingerprints. The final piece of evidence exposing her deception was the $20,000 in cash that remained untouched. Michelle had no plausible explanation for why a successful businessman and devoted father would supposedly take his own life, but she did offer an account for her own actions. She claimed she staged the scene to shield their young daughter from the harsh truth about her father's death. She admitted to police that she had wiped down the gun and washed Greg's hands to eliminate fingerprints, then orchestrated a fake home invasion and called 911. As strange as her explanation sounded, it soon became clear to police why the house had no evidence of a break-in. Michelle admitted to scrubbing the crime scene with bleach and even hitting herself in the face with a wrench to make the attack appear more believable. From the start, Keller police were skeptical of her account, but at the time, no physical evidence directly tied her to the crime. Michelle was arrested for perjury, but was quickly released to her home around 5 p.m. on the day of her husband's murder. She visited her sister Laura's house without once mentioning Greg's name. She cried sporadically, but her emotions seemed forced. When questioned by police the following morning, Laura Cusack reported that Michelle had woken up in an unusually cheerful mood. She was impeccably dressed, her hair styled and makeup flawless. In high spirits, the newly widowed Michelle went out for breakfast at a popular restaurant famous for its syrupy pancakes. While police were exploring the possibility that Greg had taken his own life and struggling to establish a motive, Michelle effectively supplied the investigation with both a supposed motive and the evidence of her own culpability. Reviewing the records from her initial interrogation, investigators were struck by the contradiction between Michelle's words, claiming she didn't care about money, and her actions. After Greg's death, she moved quickly to liquidate assets from the family businesses and began spending large sums. She also cashed checks through Greg's IT company. Though the total amount she withdrew was never fully disclosed, it was likely a substantial sum. After cashing proceeds from the sale of the Blueberries frozen yogurt store in Keller, Michelle made one of her biggest mistakes. She approached the insurance company hoping to collect on Greg's life insurance policy. Michelle was listed as the sole beneficiary on the policy, which had been taken out on August 12, 2011, almost exactly 2 months before Greg's death. However, she overlooked a critical detail. Under the terms of the policy, Greg's death was not covered because he had taken his own life. As a result, her claim was denied. Her desire to obtain The $600,000 payout later emerged as the primary motive for the crime. At the same time, another element of financial fraud came to light, further deepening suspicions about the widow. Falsified financial documents were used to secure the mortgage for the house that Greg and Michelle had been planning to buy on the eve of his death. Account numbers had been deliberately altered and the lender initially failed to detect the elaborate fraud. After Greg's death, Michelle led a scheduled meeting with the mortgage company, and the fraudulent account remained unnoticed until it drew police attention. Confident in her sense of impunity, Michelle wrote an $18,000 check to attorney Kenneth Windorn and then took a week-long vacation in Grapevine with her children. During the 3-month investigation into Greg Williams' death, police gradually unraveled the intricate web of deceit spun by his wife. An autopsy confirmed that Greg had been shot at a close range of 12 to 18 inches. Additionally, a toxicology report revealed that Greg had a high dose of sleeping pills in his system at the time of his death. Police also determined that there had been no break-in. Mrs. Williams had sedated her husband and shot him from just a foot away by turning up the volume on the television. Their daughter, sleeping in her room, remained completely unaware of what had happened. On November 3, 2011, following the Tarrant County medical examiner's findings, Greg Williams' death was officially ruled a homicide. Michelle Williams was arrested on January 9 while on her way to a fitness center. She was charged with murder, tampering with evidence, and making a false statement to police, making her both the only witness and the sole suspect in the case. Bail was initially set at $522,000. But Michelle spent just a week in custody before being released on $85,000. Dressed in gym clothes, she walked out of jail wearing a GPS monitor and accompanied by attorney Kenneth Wynn, who had officially taken on her defense. Greg's first wife, Kathy, was outraged to learn that Wynn was representing Michelle. The money she paid him came from Greg's estate, which in Kathy's view should never have been used to cover the legal fees of the woman accused of his murder. Online court records show that Kenneth Wynn had previously served as the attorney for Greg and Kathy's 2003 divorce, and his name and signature appear on legal documents related to the custody agreement for their daughter, Taylor, in 2008. However, allegations of collusion between Kenneth Wynn and Michelle Williams were later disproved with evidence. The divorce had been handled by his firm, but Korn personally had never represented Greg. Korn stated that he first learned of Greg's murder from an employee at the IT company. It was extremely shocking, he recalled, adding that Michelle only approached him for help after her attempt to cash in on Greg's death had failed. Michelle Williams then changed her name to Shelley and rebranded herself as a fitness guru attempting to start a new life on Facebook. She publicly announced a relationship with Gene Wallace, a friend of her eldest son and nearly 15 years her junior. Together, Shelley and Gene opened a fitness club in Bedford and heavily promoted it online. Wearing a GPS-monitored ankle bracelet, Michelle spent the following months enjoying her new boyfriend, fitness classes, and court proceedings. She frequently appeared in court dressed as if for a night out, mini skirts, knee-high boots, and low-cut blouses. She never mourned Greg's death for a second, said his ex-wife Kathy. Rob Conover, a friend of Greg Williams for over 20 years who attended many of Michelle's hearings, recalled how skillfully she manipulated the police at the courthouse, presenting herself as an innocent woman in need of protection. On October 9, 2013, 45-year-old Michelle Williams accepted a plea deal with the county, pleading guilty to tampering with evidence and deadly conduct. She was sentenced to 18 years in prison for these offenses. A third-degree felony recognized in only a few states. Although Michelle admitted to cleaning the gun and handling Greg's body, the absence of her DNA at the scene left doubts as to whether a first-degree murder charge would have held. Play big, win big, or lose big. Michelle said in an interview about her plea deal. I expected to do a couple of years and then I'd be out on parole. But in February 2014, Michelle suddenly reversed her stance in an interview, claiming she was not guilty. The judge immediately withdrew the plea agreement and scheduled the case for trial. Opening arguments began in the trial of the Texas woman dubbed by the media as Keller's Black Widow, accused of deliberately targeting her husband in 2011 to collect his life insurance. Michelle Williams, 45, faced charges of murder. Prosecutors described the case as a meticulously planned scheme carried out to profit from Greg's substantial life insurance policy. In their opening statement, prosecutors told the jury that Mrs. Williams had shot her husband in the head after drugging him with sleeping pills, all to collect his life insurance. The motive was money. Pure time-tested greed, Assistant District Attorney Jacques Strickland told the court. In response to media inquiries, Michelle's attorney issued a statement on her behalf. Kenneth Warren highlighted the challenges posed by the impeccably clean crime scene, noting that the prosecution struggled to prove heritation. While cleaning products were discovered in the house, it was reasonable to assume Michelle's fingerprints were on them, given that she lived there and had done the cleaning herself. If the jury determined that Michelle had tampered with evidence, staging Greg's death to appear natural, cleaning the crime scene, and then lying about it, she faced a potential life sentence. However, with her sentencing scheduled for April 21, the jury would never have the opportunity to hear the full story or weigh in on the appropriate punishment. Through careful questioning of the Williams family's friends and acquaintances, investigators uncovered details about the long-standing tensions in their household. Analysis of social media messages and correspondence revealed that the couple frequently argued, often over money. At trial, prosecutors stated that in the hours leading up to Greg Williams' violent death, he and Michelle had a dispute about finances, during which he allegedly slapped her for spending a large sum that had been set aside as a down payment on a house. Michelle Williams' defense argued that Greg Williams had taken his own life and that, as a successful businessman, he needed his wife alive, not dead. Defense attorney Clay Graham stated that Greg frequently struggled with depression and regularly used sedatives and steroids. On the night of the incident, he was reportedly deeply distressed over the recent deaths of his grandmother and his best friend, who had also died by suicide. According to Graham, when Michelle discovered her husband with a self-inflicted gunshot wound, she panicked and, in a state of fear, attempted to conceal the tragedy without fully understanding her actions. Her primary goal, he argued, was to shield their 4-year-old daughter from psychological trauma by hiding the truth. Throughout the proceedings, Michelle maintained her composed appearance, consistently appearing in court with styled hair, manicured nails, and carefully curated outfits. At one hearing, the defendant, wearing an off-white blouse and black vest, showed little emotion for most of the trial, though she made a point of wiping away tears when photographs of Greg Williams' body were shown. The court also heard testimony from Michelle's adult son, Andrew O'Brien, who revealed that his mother had asked him to help frame Greg's ex-wife, Kathy. Michelle had planned to blame Kathy for Greg's death, claiming it stemmed from unresolved disputes over custody of their daughter, Taylor. The scheme was doomed from the start, as the former spouses had never had any disagreements over custody, making it nearly impossible to fabricate such a motive. When asked about his reaction to his mother's unusual request, 26-year-old Andrew said he was shocked and believed she might be experiencing a mental breakdown. Michelle faced her sons in court when they testified against her. The jury ultimately found her guilty of felony tampering with physical evidence. She tried to delay sentencing by claiming she was pregnant with twins, but this claim was never verified, and the verdict stood. Despite her acting skills and natural charm, which she displayed at every hearing, Michelle could not escape a harsh sentence caught between portrayals of her as a cold-blooded criminal and as a deranged wife and mother acting on impulse. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.